on this stage to show you their skills live and in person. Watch as they chop, grind, and weld their creations into existence right before your very eyes. Feel free to ask questions at any time directly to your host, Pat Jansen. The doors to the shop are open, so pull up a stool, kick back, and welcome to the Grease and Gears Garage.
Hey, here we go. Here we are, ready to go again. Here with the Cherokee Run, Blue Ridge Run here with, we're going to have Evan Favaro up here today. I am Mark Persichetti. I'm from Flat Broke Chops and Rods. We would like to thank Progressive for bringing Grease and Gears to you and gives us the ability to maybe show everybody out there that anybody can do this. It's all a matter of what you put into it. I mean, if Evan can do it, anybody can do it, you know. But yeah, these guys come up here, they give you their inside scoop, some tech tips. They give you some information on how to do some of the things you think it's too hard to do. And Evan, what do you think?
Not much.
Well, I know that, but I mean, like, for them, what do you think?
Yeah, it's you could build anything you want, and you don't need crazy expensive tools all the time. Today, I'm going to build a gas tank. Hopefully start to finish, or at least a shell of one. Yeah. Basically just with this planishing hammer and just the tools that you see on stage.
You know, it would probably be really nice. An English wheel.
Yeah. Typically, I would use an English wheel, a combination of a bunch of different tools. You got planishing hammer, an English wheel, shrinker stretchers. I'll throw some beads in it for some details on the top of the tank. And basic hand tools, hammer dolly. You don't need $1 million machines to build cool stuff in your garage.
Yeah, we had talked about yesterday, Austin and Joe was up here and Brian Butera talking about, you know, tools and, you know, we show up with an array of tools. We had, you know, Chris from Cycle Source Magazine and myself, Progressive Insurance, Eastwood, people, Mittler Brothers. A lot of people really pitched in to help out to give us a bit of a setup. And tool-wise, we had talked about yesterday, you don't need the best tools in the world, but if you're going to spend money on something, research it. Buy the right tool. When it comes to welders and stuff like that, make sure you're not getting a cheap version. You're going to get something you're not going to grow out of real fast. Sure. Which, in all reality, you can do it with anything. The better the tool, the longer it's going to last for you.
Yeah. Tooling is one of my best investments I spent in my tooling. When I first started my shop, it was, of course, the basic stuff that I could afford at the time. Yeah. You know, I started my shop when I was 21, and it's like I didn't really have much money, so I would just buy the basic stuff. And then as I figured out what tool I needed more, you know, I was using an English wheel a lot, so I would upgrade that eventually, and then I would upgrade all my dies and stuff like that. And piece by piece, the welder progressively got better, the planishing hammer got better, you know, so slowly but surely you build that arsenal of
you
of tooling.
Expand your tool horizon.
Sure. And it also depends, obviously, if you do it for a living or not.
Right.
You know, like for me, my English wheel is my livelihood. Yeah. That's how I make my living.
Right. That we don't have here, by the way.
The English wheel, it's not here. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I thought you were going to go to my house and pick it up last night.
Nah, it's far.
Yeah, it's not only doing this, we have a bunch of crap going on here. We have Dave Pierwood's paint show going on outside. It's sort of a shame that our camera's just directing to us, because to turn around and see what's going on in this room, AMD stuff's going on, which I'd really like to thank Bob Kay, Kevin Dunworth for everything that they do to help out, and just the array of bikes here. It's just amazing. If you could see some of the stuff, world-class stuff right here, which the winner of this AMD goes to
Germany.
Is that it? Germany. Yeah, it goes to Germany to compete.
Nowhere near here.
Yeah, no, it's you could probably get there from here though.
You got to ride real fast.
Yeah, to skate across the water. But yeah, it's awesome. The Cycle Source bike show's going on. I mean, the event's crazy out there. There's people everywhere. There's great bands. I mean, the atmosphere here is just fantastic. So we're honored to be able to be a part of this and be here and give everybody the ability to see what these guys, you know, put everything aside to come down here and try and be a part of it and try and give something back. It's a bit difficult. We don't have Pat Jansen here. I'm a little bit upset about it. I think I'm a little bit better looking than Pat is and all, but
I don't know about that, but okay.
You know, well, hey, watch it now. I know that's your BFF.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit odd. I'm usually not the spokesperson, but I'm giving it my best shot. So Pat, hurry up, for Christ's sake already. So let's get started, Evan. Where do we go from here? Unless you want to say something bad about Pat, that'd be great.
But Pat's great. Pat is great. Pat just married
great.
me and my wife. It was great.
Yes, he did.
My name is Evan Favaro. I own Speakeasy Motors out of Wallkill, New York. I started it in 2011, full time. 2013 till last year, I was a fabricator at Orange County Choppers. Metal shaping is just kind of what I do all day, every day.
Whether you do a great job.
It's not just motorcycles, primarily motorcycles, but recently with my shop, I've been doing a lot of car restorations, full ground-up car restorations.
Right up my alley.
Porsche 356s. I'm doing a 36 Master Deluxe Chevy now, Model A, 79 Scout. It's like all over the place.
You did your Ford for your wedding.
I did. I built my Model A, for my wedding. Yeah,
that's what you rode out of. But I was a little jealous.
Flathead V8, thing's badass.
Whatever, Evan. I don't even care anymore. Speaking of flathead V8s, we actually scored a flathead V8 for Flat Broke.
Yep.
Chris's panel trucks and end up getting a flathead in it. We're pretty
Merc.
excited.
It's a Merc.
Oh yeah, I put a Merc crankshaft in my car.
255. Yeah.
Nice. It's a stroker.
Hey, while I got you guys, I want to remind you that everyone at home on social media is watching this on 7 different social media channels through a CycleSource Restream. You're welcome to send in your comments. You can see up on the screen right now. Even if you're sitting in the audience and you have a question for these guys, you can shoot a question through social media. Carlos Amador already in the house today.
Carlos,
first person in. So
nice.
we know what his hobby is, watching us.
Right. We'd love to have you here, Carlos. Everybody's welcome to send your questions along.
So today I'm gonna build a gas tank, and I've done this seminar.
Is this like the unveiling? Is that what that is?
Yeah, no. This is the mold. Numerous times building this gas tank. The reason I like to build this tank because it's small, but it shows a lot of different
features
of shaping metal. So this, it's just it's a Sportster based looking gas tank, but the same exact process I use when I'm building a car panel or an airplane part, or whatever you want. I don't know where
that thing's kicking your ass.
This is just an old rusty shell that I made. I made this at one of the seminars.
Sturgis.
And it was either Sturgis or I think this one was Laconia.
Was it?
Yeah. So hopefully the planishing hammer can achieve most of this. Most of this is done with an English wheel, so this seminar will probably be a little louder than most of them.
So have somebody hold their fingers in your ears while he's using the planishing hammer.
Yeah, this is a little oxidized from sitting around for a couple of years, but
little patina makes it worth what it ain't.
Sure.
So where do we start? What do you got?
Basically, the way I start is the definition of metal shaping is there's metal shaping and metal forming. Metal forming is when you're just bending. This is forming. You're just forming this piece of paper. You're just basically changing the direction of it. You're not changing the thickness of the metal. Metal shaping, when you add shape to a panel, is when you're changing the thickness of it, whether you're making it thinner or thicker.
Right.
So shrinking it, you're making it thicker. If you use like a compressive force like an English wheel or a planishing hammer or hammer and dolly, you're stretching it, so you're making it thinner. The reason that I use paper is the same exact surface as a piece of sheet metal. So, like this piece of paper can only bend this way or this way. So, but obviously with concave and convex shapes like that, when you have all this curve and all these different radiuses and all that. By the way, radius is my favorite word, and I'm going to use it a lot.
Oh, okay. Great.
So
yesterday's favorite word was Will Ramsey.
Yeah, it is. So
do a shot.
This piece of paper you can't just see that big tuck right there.
Yeah.
So that piece of paper right there is telling you exactly where this piece of sheet metal would need to be shrunk.
Right.
Because I would put a fold in that, and then the paper would come down. So now I have this fold here, and what I would do is I would mark that. So you could see I have all these lines on the back. But I'll do that whole process. I'll map this whole thing out.
But like we were saying, there's like tricks a lot of people wouldn't think, to make the template's one thing, but to mark your points where you're actually going to make your stretch or shrink or whatever is going to be at.
Sure.
So, those little things are what we try and bring out and show everybody. It's not to overdo it, not to underdo it, trying to give you some kind of an in on exactly how these guys have been doing it for years and what's worked for them.
Mm-hmm. It's not really a guessing game. There is a method behind the madness.
Well, who did you Speaking of Will Ramsey, doing another shot. Who did you learn? You and Will have something in common right there. So
yeah, we both trained with Fay Butler,
right?
Who's
a
world-renowned
metal guy.
He taught Jesse James. He taught
yeah
hundreds of all the top metal shapers in the world. All went to this guy. He's
right.
Fay is in Massachusetts, in the back of a barn, and you're surrounded by his 1914 or 12 Pierce Arrow, and the dude builds. It's just incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I've done it a few times, 3-day seminars. It's just one-on-one, really awesome. You spend half that time, table time, with all the books out, all just studying all the molecular structure of the steel, and down to, literally all you're doing is you're controlling and manipulating
the
molecules in the sheet metal or the aluminum or the tubing or whatever. There's all a method and a science behind all that.
Which is pretty cool because, talking with Evan and talking with, somebody like Will Ramsey, when you're done with Will, the majority of the time your head hurts because he gives you so much information. Instead of telling you how to bend a piece of metal or how to make these, he gives you the structure, the molecules, the size, and you're like, when you're done, you're like, holy crap, I should have brought a piece of paper.
Yeah.
But knowing what goes into this and how much more time and effort that they've come to understand more the metal than just actually making the piece, which again is something that, luckily we have the opportunity to bring this to you because sometimes it makes it easier for you. If you go too far, you start thinning the metal, you crack it, it gets thin in places you don't want it. Keep in mind between bikes and cars, a lot of vibration, a lot of movement, a lot of heat, holding fuel. So all of this is a factor when it comes down to welding and everything. You don't want it to be too thin in the wrong areas.
Right. Yeah, it's all a combination of all that stuff to bring it all together. Basically the way I'll start any panel, whether it's a fender, a gas tank, whatever you name it, a saddlebag, anything, I'll build a form or a buck, whether that is out of, sometimes if it's something radical that I'm just kind of pulling out of thin air, I'll use the long TIG welding rod. And I'll shape the tank just out of wire just to get set all my body lines. And I built a couple motorcycles modeled after 2 Ferraris and a Lamborghini, right? So it was like full molded bikes. I've done a bunch of them. So in order to mold all that, using the paper is kind of hard. So I'll lay all those lines out with rod because that line will follow from the front fender up to the neck all the way back down.
It gives you a visual too,
Right.
So which is huge. Some people can't see.
Yeah.
Even in that, another factor on this is some people can't see the finished product, and that's one thing that people like you have the ability to start setting yourself up and see where you want to go with it.
Sure.
Which is pretty cool.
Through my years in my shop, I kind of freestyle build, but my years at Orange County, we built a lot of bikes off of a rendering of this is what the customer wants, this is what we designed. So like,
you got a basic
perfect example is that Ferrari bike. You can't just start. Yeah, you would lay it all out and build all the aqueducts and all that stuff and scoops and molds.
It all has to flow.
Out of wire,
Speaking of flowing, we need air. Watch this trick.
Sure. So, especially when you're dealing with like those pictures, you got to set all that out. So anyway, what I would do if I would build a gas tank, if it wasn't out of wire, I would go to Lowe's or Home Depot and I get that rigid 2-inch foam house insulation that you put behind the wall, but the rigid stuff, and I'll cut it up and I'll glue it all together. So I have a big cube of this insulation, right? And I'll carve it. I'll use an electric knife and razors and sandpaper and stuff, and I'll build a buck or a mold.
Sort of like what a interior person that's built makes seats. Somebody that does interior, a lot of times that's how they'll mold their foam for their seats and stuff like that. It's with a bread knife or an electric knife.
So for this seminar, I'll just use this other tank and I'll basically reverse engineer. Say this is just my mold, whether this is made out of wire or foam.
Right.
This one is made out of metal. So that's where the whole design aspect comes in. And throughout history and design, this is another thing that you learn with Fay, is all the way down to beaten up metal is the history of it and design, and especially in like cars and motorcycles and all those body lines. I like to model a lot of my bikes after like pre-war car body lines, Auburns, Duesenberg, stuff like that.
Yeah. which are a piece of art in themselves.
Right. So, like that most recent bike I built, where the tail was a gas tank.
Yeah.
There's a body line in there that I molded after an Auburn boat tail Speedster.
Right.
It's
Which
just
was your personal bike. You built that for yourself.
Yeah.
Did not. Yeah. Which you no longer have since.
I no longer have that. No.
You sold your own bike. You don't even have a bike anymore. I can't even talk to you right now.
I do. I sold my only motorcycle. Yeah. I got my hot rod though.
Yeah.
So that's good.
No, I'm jealous.
That's all right. So back to design is, say you have this mold. Now, for me, it has to be appealing to the eye, and the way that design works with people is you only have about 3 seconds to keep somebody's eye on something.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Short
And that's
attention
all
span.
based off of the reflection of light.
Right.
And that's where you have, so like this gas tank, or any gas tank really, if you look on like Sportster tank, you can see that there's a light line here.
Right.
And it's curved. That's why cars aren't just straight. Well, nowadays
Right.
they're
Some of
not
them
much
are,
design, but those cars of that era are all super sweeps and,
Right.
and really, really curvy. One way, you have to establish a light line to build a proper template.
Right.
So say I made this out of that foam insulation, there's no shiny surfaces on it. So you can't really establish a light line on it. One way to do that, say this is made out of that pink house foam insulation, is I would literally take a black plastic bag, right? And then just throw the mold or the buck into a black plastic bag.
Yeah.
And then now I have a glossy surface
Right.
on this whatever mold I just made.
So you know where your actual
Right.
lines are.
Yeah, you would tape it real nice, and then you can kind of see that light line
Yep.
a little better. I don't know what the lighting here is, but you can catch that line. And then I'll mark that out, and then that's what I'll make my template after.
Well, just another one of your tricks of the trade.
And that's it.
I mean, I know people
It's
that
expensive
actually,
though. You gotta work this
and
into
it's
the budget.
plastic, you
Yeah.
know, safety first. But I know people that'll actually shoot paint on them. You know what I mean? They'll shoot black paint on them to get that line or to be able to see.
Same
Yeah.
concept, sure. So I should
Would you-
probably get dirty. You got a Sharpie? Oh, here.
Yep.
I got one.
You got one?
Yep. So first I'll map the mold out.
Let's clean off your table here a little
I
bit.
know, I'm a mess. So, say this is all said and done and I made this, yada yada. Then I'll find all my centers, and we only have so much time, so I'm gonna get to work. Find all my centers here.
So you're just generally laying yourself out. So
Yeah,
that you're setting this up sort of like you don't have a template. You're going to make your template.
Correct. Yeah. And this, I'll just rough this one out. 6.
You know, and a lot of through this, like, you know, Pat has always mentions that, you know, we're just a bunch of mechanics in garages that, you know, enjoy working on cars. I mean, me and Chris would flat broke chops and rods. Pat would Sin Central. Evan would Speakeasy. We're just a bunch of guys that enjoyed messing with stuff and found a way to actually make a living doing it, which it's a skim living, but, you know, and one of the coolest things about it is the fact that the camaraderie between everybody is so great, you know, lately, that to be able to come up here and showcase your ideas, showcase the things you do and how you do them is pretty awesome.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
But
it's cool. People pay me to do my hobby. It's awesome.
Right.
You know, it's a really cool feeling.
But there's a fine line between where your hobby becomes your job and it
Right.
doesn't become a hobby anymore.
Yep, that's why I like to do a bunch of different projects. Just keep everything fresh. You know?
And I'll tell you, I mean, me and Chris have been doing this for 20-some years with the magazine, and then, you know, Flat Broke we've been working on for years also. But one of the cool things about it that takes it from not being a hobby and into a job is that camaraderie, is that friendship, to be able to come here and hang out with people like, you know, you and Austin and Xavier Miller and, you know, Brian Butera and Tim Dixon and all those people.
Yeah, it's
and
great.
sit down, and it's amazing how much you don't know about these people, and every time we get together we learn a little bit more, and it all reflects on the builds. And so to see things about you that come out in your builds, your design, is pretty awesome. You start really learning more and more about people through this, and it's a great experience, you know, between Progressive giving us this opportunity to bring this to you between all the work that Chris has done with Cycle Source Magazine to give us the ability to have met all you people and get to watch you do this is an honor.
Yeah,
so
it's fun.
yeah, it's pretty awesome.
So I have like my center line established. This is really important to get this nice and centered.
Yeah.
Basically, the whole thing is based off of that.
Yeah.
It's going to be based off of this line. When it comes down to shaping my piece of metal, I'll be laying it onto this and try to duplicate all that. Something else that's really important, this here is called a radius gauge. This is made by Fay Butler. These are two different versions of them. Basically what this is, your radius is all marked out on each one. So see all the different sweeps here.
Right.
So now that I have my my mold is already made, I gotta figure out and map this out. And
Right.
like I said, this isn't just guesswork. I don't just throw a die on this machine and see
what's
if it
gonna
works.
happen, right.
It's all kind of executed. So I'll use this tool, right? So I need to figure out what radius this
Overall
is,
radius.
what the sweep is. So this tool, I'll come in and I'll figure out, so you can see how like that 18-inch radius
Right.
fits real nice there. So I'll kind of map this whole thing out. And then it gets steeper, the radius starts to change as it comes into here.
The tighter it gets.
So I'll try to figure that out. These are different. Let's see.
You can buy these. You can go on.
Yeah, you can go on Fay's website and buy these. It's an everyday tool for me.
Yeah.
It
To keep yourself consecutive.
Right.
Because keep in mind, the closer that you get the metal work, the less body work you have to do.
Yeah.
And in all reality, it comes down to the least amount of mud work. I think in all reality, the better the product is. Better the finish is. Your finish guy, your paint guy, in the real world is only as good as the guy that builds the part.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, this is the foundation.
Right.
You can't build a house without a foundation.
Right.
So, especially when you get into I built numerous like raw metal body bikes.
Yep.
Where there's no paint.
Yeah.
So that's when it comes down a lot to having a good hammer.
Yep.
And
Good
and
dies.
dolly. Yeah.
English wheel that we don't
Yep.
have.
And figuring out your highs and lows and how to
Right.
identify those by getting them all out and again using lights. So in my shop where my lifts are on the bikes that I'm building, I use 8-foot fluorescent lights and I run them. I square the
one
lifts
solid
up to
line
them.
of light.
So that way, anytime I look at the bike, I have a nice parallel line
Yeah.
that's based off of.
Yep. And a body by trade. I do a lot of body work, a lot of paint work, and I have in my past. Somebody sending me a piece of sheet metal that's rough makes it so much harder for me to do
Sure.
the body and the paint. And I mean, if you could see some of the bikes in this room, the paint work is like literally off the charts. And there's a lot of time, a lot of layout work that goes into it. And like you're saying, that those lines, those smooth, clean lines make it so much nicer, so much easier to work with. So that's a big factor.
Absolutely. I'll spend, when I get a tank to this point, you can't really metal finish a tank, or by metal finish, I mean getting out the highs and the lows
Right.
without having access to the back of the panel. And that's when it comes into the technique of hammering on dolly and off dolly.
Right,
You know,
right.
on dolly to bring it up or off dolly to bring them back down and figure that all out. So it's having proper access to the panel. That's why I'll build this whole shell and not do the bottom yet.
Yeah,
Make sure
do
that
the bottom
top
last.
is as good as I can get, as good
Right.
as I can get it, and then do the bottom. And again, proper lighting. you
Yeah.
know.
Well, we do not have proper lighting here,
Nah, it's fine.
but
I mean, I don't have an English wheel, so it'll be barbaric. It'll be good.
so
though.
tired of hearing about this English wheel
I'll bust
already.
your balls about it. Nice. Another thing when you're building a tank that's supposed to be symmetrical, not every build is supposed to be symmetrical, but
Right.
98% of them are.
Yeah.
Your mold or your buck might not be perfect. It's not a finished product. So what I'll do is I'll paper pattern this whole top, and then I'll use that center line again.
Right.
I'll fold this in half and trim it. That way
Make
I
sure
have
it's the
a
same.
mirrored template.
And
Pretty
the funny part is
basic
you
stuff.
can't see both sides of the bike at the same time. So, you know,
Yeah, but if you're a perfectionist,
that's a
you know,
Pat Jansen line right
yeah.
there. You can't see both sides at the same time.
That's it. So this is just regular poster board you buy at any craft store. So I use these little magnets here, and
You just asked me for magnets. You had them the whole time.
did I?
Yeah.
I found them in my bag.
Oh, Evan.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's that bag? Let's look in that bag. You might have an English wheel buried in there.
That
Hey,
would be
keep in
awesome.
mind out there, you know, if you have any questions for Evan, I mean, not directed towards this tank, any questions in general, just, you know, feel free to send them in. We'll try and get answers to that. We have a room full of people here, so you
Hey,
never
this
know.
is in from Stephen Gibson on Facebook. I got to say, I've learned so much watching this guy doing some great artistic metal work. I'm grateful you yelled out at me while hiking the Appalachian Trail. A true new age future bike building genius. Those are big
Does he
big
have anything
shoes to
say?
fill.
Does he have
Who said
anything to
that?
say about Evan?
Who was that?
That was Stephen Gibson.
Nice.
All right, how much did that cost?
The man, the myth, the legend. Right. So I got this piece of paper on here. Now it's still, the template's not done yet. So I have my center line established, but I need to know where I need to put my shrinks and my stretches and all that.
Right.
I already know that the top has an 18-inch radius, which I mapped out with this gauge here. But in these corners, I know that I need to tuck in so that this piece of paper can
Where
fold
you
in real nice.
previously marked some
Right.
stuff also.
So I'll do these folds, and these will show me where the shrinks need to happen and how deep they need to go.
Yeah.
You know, because if you do it just on the edge, you might not have a gradual
Right.
radius. It all depends on how steep you want it to be. And I'll work my way all the way around. Yada, yada.
How do you estimate on your template the depth of your shrink or your stretch?
What's up?
How are you actually estimating the depth of your shrink
It's
on that template?
physically how far that piece of paper goes in. So you can actually like
Right.
see how far that piece of
Open
paper
it and measure it.
wants to come in to meet that form.
Yeah, I've actually watched a guy with like a real thin, almost like a wrapping paper
Yeah.
do the same thing in every fold. He taped it all, and when he pulled it off, it almost set itself in place, and then he'd pull off and actually take those measurements.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
that was a guy doing 30, or early 30s cars.
Yeah.
That's where I learned for the first time how to do that.
Then you have that physical shape left.
Yeah,
too.
and then when you open the paper up, you know exactly what your size of material is, like you were saying,
Yeah,
prior to
I'll use
shrinking or
this
stretching.
right onto
Right.
the piece of sheet metal.
Yep.
One style that is really awesome and it's free is you go to the post office and you get those flat rate mailer envelopes.
Yeah, right.
But they're not like the cardboard ones. They're the thinner ones that you'll see in like T-shirts or something.
Yeah.
They're really hard to rip.
Yep.
And it's kind of like a fiber paper. I don't even know what you call it. And they're free
So you're
from any
stealing
post
off the
office.
postal service.
Yes,
Pretty much.
100%.
There we go. Now we're
so-
going to jail.
That stuff's really good too because it's
Yeah.
super.
It's
really,
durable.
It's
Yeah.
super durable and it's really.
And you can actually
thin
tape
and
that
strong.
and pull the tape off of it.
Yeah,
If you use
so
like a
that's what I'm
blue
doing.
tape, you won't rip it.
Right. So now that I know where my shrinks and stretches are going to be for the most part, I'm going to take this template.
That template has some miles on it.
I built probably all the seminars with you guys. I've used this setup here. So I'll take this all off now that I have it all mapped out. And this line is basically in the center of my light line, which is established earlier, basically right along that weld. I'm going to take this, I'm going to throw it onto a piece of sheet metal, magnetize it down, and start cutting some metal.
We starting with air or
Yeah, I'll see
nibble.
if this nibbler works, or that shear, and then maybe I'll just come back with it with a angle grinder or something, just clean
Yeah.
it up. You know. This is just regular 18 gauge sheet metal. I just buy it from my local steel shop.
Now, you'll use your edge as much as you can, or will you take your material right out of the center?
What's that?
Will you work with your edge? I mean, I know a lot of people that won't work with the actual edge. They'll like lay it in the center of the material.
Oh yeah, it depends. I mean, I do it more just so I have less waste.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, right.
And it also depends on the shape if I need an actual perfect straight edge, but usually I almost usually don't. So I'll throw this down, map it out.
Your trusty Sharpie. It's amazing how much we use Sharpies for.
Yeah. I almost always have a Sharpie in my pocket at all times.
Well, I normally do until somebody borrows it. You never see it again.
Yeah. Again, I'll map that center line so everything stays consistent on that. This is basically a reference point. So like when I put this in the non-existent English wheel in a minute,
right,
I'm going to base all my rolls off of that
on
center
that
line.
line.
So it stays nice and even. You know, I'll work from the center and work your way out. So when you're stretching metal, you don't want to work from the outside and work in, because then you'll create a low or a shape that you can't really get out. Once you put tension into the panel, it's a lot harder to
Get it back out.
So I'll work from the center.
Yeah,
and
because
work
you're
my way out.
actually spreading the molecules out, you know, and it's easier to spread them out than it is to put them back together.
So I have these V marks here from the shrinking, from my reference when I molded it over the buck. So I'll just put those on there just so when I go over to the shrinker, I know kind of where to go.
Right.
And then some, you know, there is the finesse to it. So I know where majority of it needs to be, but then I'll like feather it out.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
that's where just the years of practice, you know, this stuff's super frustrating. And I've built, I don't know, 150 gas tanks, right?
Yeah.
And they're not, they slowly, progressively get better, but this stuff is super time consuming.
Yep. It is, and it's like not the as seen on TV thing here, because you know, unfortunately we're on limited time. But to actually see what you go through, the camera doesn't go off and come back on, and we don't throw a product on the table. So, you know, I mean, hopefully, you know, we have the time to go as far as we can. So
most people think like, yeah, you could build a bike in 2 hours.
Yep.
You know, just like they do on TV.
Oh yeah. It's amazing what happens when the camera's not on.
Even during the heyday at OCC, when we were cranking bikes out, there was, you know, sometimes I build a bike, you know, obviously with the team of guys, not me solely.
Right.
2-3 weeks start to finish. That's paint and everything. It was nuts. It was crazy. But the sheet metal part of it, a gas tank, no matter what, is always usually, depending on the design, obviously, the longest part of a build.
Yeah.
I'll average, depending on the complexity of the design, about 20 to 25 hours on a basic tank. Like this tank, if I were to make it real nice, paint ready, you'll see me do it real quick in an hour. But really, if I were to really make it a tank for a motorcycle, I'll have a solid 20 hours into
easily,
this piece. Yeah. Or you can go on a website and buy it for $180. But
and have it mailed to your house. So you do the math.
Yeah.
But there's nothing, you know, nothing like hand building something when you're done, stepping back and seeing that product.
Yep.
I mean, we have, you know, me and Chris with Frat Bloke have probably, 5 bikes here? 4 or 5 bikes here, and like to stand back and look at these things, you know, it's awesome. You know, the finished product just is amazing.
This is just a regular style shear.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm gonna try to see how sharp of a curve I can get out of this. The one that I use is a shear. It's a. I don't even know what the
open edge. You have an open edge one?
I don't even know what it's called.
It's a shear.
Pretty educational.
Someday you'll have to send me a picture of it.
It's like a nibbler. It's a nibbler style. It's like this, but it's got a reciprocating blade like that.
Yeah.
I like that because I can do nice tight curves and stuff like that. So I'm not okay. So this now that I have this all mapped out, I got my center line all down there. I like to use just like we said, a regular Sharpie. So when I'm trying to make a precision piece and I'll Sharpie the line, I try to either follow the left side of the line, the center,
in or out,
or the right.
Yeah.
You know, I like to compare this. This is like a dumb analogy, but remember the movie, the Mel Gibson movie, Revolutionary War, The Patriot.
Patriot, yeah.
There's a line in that movie where the kid was in the woods and he's going to kill the British soldiers.
Yeah.
And his father taught him to aim small, miss small. So instead of aiming for the dude's chest, he aimed for a button on the chest, right?
Right.
So I use that, right? So instead of aiming for the Sharpie line, I'll aim
Right.
for the right side of the Sharpie line.
Yeah. I have a tendency to always go bigger. So if I have
I
the
heard that about
opportunity
you,
to
yeah.
stay out to keep myself, give me a little bit more material to work
Sure,
with.
sure.
So let's see how this works for you. Oh boy.
Pretty good. Let's try this. Make it.
Oh boy, somebody's gonna get hurt. Which direction you going?
That'll work.
Get that thing in the door.
How am I doing so far?
Oh, you're doing great. You look
Thanks.
fantastic. If that matters at all.
And then if these don't work, you just go down to this.
I usually have pretty good luck with this. I use the shears a lot.
I have a question while you're working on it, Evan, real quick. What do you suggest for cutting sheet metal moving up to heavier gauges? Because like a nibbler and stuff like that, unless you're going to pay a ridiculous amount of money,
Right.
the nibblers that you get beyond 16 gauge are going to bust apart.
Sure.
The shears are a pain in the ass same way. We've snapped the fronts off of them. I mean, other than just a bandsaw, is there any go-to tool to handle heavier gauge steel?
I use a lot, like a Beverly throatless shear is
Yeah.
so worth the money. You can cut up to 1/8 inch with that thing on crazy curves.
Oh, yeah.
Great tool, really clean, and they're precise.
Right.
There's a lot of imitations of the Beverly out there, and at first I tried one, and I opened up the box, closed it, and sold it. It was that bad.
And that's what we were saying earlier about making sure, research your tool.
Sure.
Just don't buy anything. If you're going to spend money, spend money the right way.
A real Beverly shear is $900, $1,000 bucks, but it's
Pays for
it's a
itself.
lifetime tool.
Yeah.
You can buy them used on eBay, and they're from the 50s, 60s, and they're still just as good as the
Yep.
day they were new. You can still get all new blades for
Right.
them, and really good tools. I'm gonna chop
more?
this.
And there you go. So look how nice and close you were to your lines. So when you were a kid, you were pretty good at coloring inside those lines.
I was, yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Obviously, it shows.
Usually I'll use that like a throatless Beverly shear that I was just talking about.
Right.
Makes this cake a minute.
Yeah.
You know.
And the nice part about that is the cleanliness of the edge.
Yeah.
Nice.
You know,
no cleanup
line.
time. Yeah.
Sure.
Definitely a big difference.
A sheared edge is something I'll talk about later on, especially when I get into welding, about the proper way to weld two panels together.
Right.
Has a lot to do with metal finishing and the way you're. We'll talk about that later. But
Yeah. Well, I'll be here. I'll wait for you. Where we
Great.
go?
You have an angle grinder? I'll just use that for now. So that's the gas tank. Thank you, everybody.
Is that what you're looking for, or
Matt.
do you want a cordless one?
Yeah, just cordless. Regular one's fine. Oh, hey, look at that.
Austin put that for you. He put that there. So pretty much cleaning up that edge, trying to get yourself back onto that line's the next step. Give you a nice platform to work with here. So, and again, while we have a minute to thank the guys from the Cherokee Run, Blue Ridge Run here, to give us the ability to come here and, you know, take the time to show you some of this stuff and bring these guys here. It's definitely worth coming to check this place out. Check out the ride. Said the Pirouette's paint show's going on outside. Cycle Source bike show's going on. A lot of stuff. People just coming in and out, checking out all these bikes for AMD. Definitely something that's, if you are in the area, have time to come on down and check out what's going on. There's going to be some great bands here today. There's food. There's just definitely worth coming down if you have the ability. And again, if you're at home, you have a question, you have something, you know, a comment, feel free to send it in and we'll do the best we can to, you know, give you an answer to your question. You know, on TV, they do that so much faster, Evan. You know, and again, he was talking about staying inside, outside your line. Like for me, my preference is to stay outside and then take the time to clean up to your line. I think in all reality, it gives you a better, you know, a better finish on your edge. And you're staying inside your template. I mean, Chris, you've done a lot of fab work, and I mean, your small sheet metal stuff, do you take the time as much, which, I mean, I know how you do it, with your big pieces, your frame sections and stuff like that? The same setup for you?
What's the question? What do you mean?
Whenever you do it, do you lay your stuff out and pre-mark? Give yourself, like we were talking about, stay inside the line or outside the line. Do you always go over?
I do always go over because I'm not like Evan. Guys like Evan and Will, they've got a real solid foundation in measurement and, you know, and
Finished, where the finished piece is
for
gonna
me,
be.
I'm still like a junior apprentice to this stuff, so I leave extra all the time, and I try to come down to where I need to be.
Right.
Like I'm real apprehensive about, you know, taking too much. So it takes me a little bit longer because I tend to be more careful.
It's like anything, with, whether it's welding or metal shaping or engine building. It's all about seat time. Just getting it done. I all the time still. I always throw panels out. I'll start shaping something. It doesn't
it
fit.
doesn't pan
Sometimes
out.
you can over shrink, you can overstretch, and you can overwork the metal and get it to the point beyond repair. It's just part of the game, you know. And that's just experience, you know. That goes with anything. Yeah. So, do you have a file? I might as well. So, what I was gonna say earlier is, so I ground that edge down. Depending on the tooling that you have, like if there was a Beverly shear, you wouldn't really have to come behind it with like an angle grinder. So these wheels are made out of like an aluminum oxide. So grinding this edge, basically you're whether more so on aluminum, but still with steel, that aluminum oxide gets impregnated into the metal. That aluminum oxide is going to be an impurity
for the
in
weld.
the metal later on for the weld.
Right. So
you want a sheared edge, so not a ground edge. So a sheared edge would be a nibbler because you're cutting the metal, you're not grinding it. But in this instance where you do have to come into the panel with a grinder and get it to fit wherever you're going to, what I'll do is I'll come back with just any kind of, you know, flat file or round file depending on the shape, and I'll file this whole edge. So now this file is shearing that whole edge, it's getting rid of that first layer and getting the impurities that you just put into it from the grinder, gets those back out. But I'll do that more right before I weld, you know, because there's still a lot of
work to do.
So sometimes, especially on certain tools, say you know you're using a giant power hammer, you'll spray this with oil and cover it all. And, you know, you're going to do all that prep work before you're welding. But just something to touch base on.
So where do we go next?
So I know that the center off of my paper template is an 18-inch radius, and then along the edges was 2-inch. And my shrinks need to come up here. Now what I would do is, now that I have this piece cut out, can you pass me that English wheel over there?
Yeah, I am right now. I'm getting it set up for you right now.
I would put the proper corresponding die into the English wheel and roll it. Basically what the English wheel does is it's a compressive force, and it's a flat upper die and whatever radius lower die, and that will give you your desired.
And you can actually English wheel flat.
You can.
Yeah. So it's not only to make bevels, but you know, you can English wheel it back, a bevel back out of it. Right?
Yeah, you can lessen it. Once a panel is flat and you change that shape, you'll never get it truly flat.
Back
like that piece. No matter what you do, if I hit that hammer with a once, it'll never lay flat again. Perfect, really, you know. So that all depends on the radius you do and how hard you pull down and how tight you have your anvil. There's a lot of variables. So I'm gonna try to achieve this with a flatter die on this planishing hammer. Basically what I'll be doing is thinning out the metal, so I'll be stretching it, and that'll give it a
let's try and get that up out of the way, give you a little bit of working room, which we don't have a lot of.
What's that?
The working room, so you're not running the, you know, which is something to pay attention to. So while you're working with it, you're not running the metal into the airline. Since this isn't the ideal tool for what you're looking for.
Normally I would achieve this top crown, which you could see on this mold here, real slight radius. A couple passes on the wheel would achieve that. I'm gonna try to do it with this. Should be all right. I'm gonna grab these earmuffs. It's gonna be loud.
Did we readjust that back to where you wanted it, height-wise?
I don't know yet.
I mean, obviously he's trying to, with the bevel die on the bottom, give him the same objective an English wheel would, to a bit of a crown to it.
What? So anybody that's napping on the couch over there is now awake.
You can actually see you're starting to get a bit of a...
Yeah, you can see even just if you put it on the
it's
panel
not-
now it's got some tension into it, and it's not sitting flat anymore.
So, real quick, on the adjustment on the tension on that, would you want that tighter or looser for more of a hit? How would you?
Tighter. That depends on your air pressure.
Right.
And there's a lot of variables behind that. I believe this machine is just on or off.
Yep.
My machine at home
You can
is variable depending on
adjust.
foot
You know,
pro.
you can
I
adjust
Okay.
it with the air. So,
Okay.
you know, to be all the way on, you get more air.
Okay,
so
I'll
you
probably
can
do
a
that.
little bit
I'll
of
probably do
adjustment.
that. Go through it again. One thing that's important when you're using power hammers, especially like a Yoder, like a big power hammer, is body language. Is like you could see like what I was talking about earlier, where I'll work from the center out. But another thing is I'll keep my elbows in, and I'm not like holding the panel like this, real light.
Let the
and
machine
limbo.
do the work.
Right, because if you hold on to it and you get too rigid, the machine, it'll start to bounce around and get all kind of crazy on you. And also for fatigue on your own body.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're doing this for hours. It takes a toll on you.
Yeah, it rocks through your bones.
Yeah, especially when you get into the big power hammers and you know, stuff like that. I'm gonna do that again a little more, just to get a little more shape to it.
And I don't know if the camera's catching it, but he's starting from the center line and working his way out, you know, fairly in a nice straight line in the, you know, convex of the part itself. So.
It's also important to just stay consistent with your lines.
That's what I was saying. I was saying you're working from the center line and working your way out. Nice straight lines, try and get
nice
an even bevel.
speed.
Yeah.
So now that you can see that now you got some shape to this.
Yep.
But it's still pretty flat, and obviously this isn't. So I'll start that general shape. Usually on a wheel, I'll come and I'll start to pull down, and
on
then I'll
it.
direct that in. I'm going to fine tune that later when I come in with the shrinks, and then I'll hit the planishing hammer again with a sharper radius die, and then get that edge established.
So, I know I've actually asked this question to you before. Why wouldn't you just take it and bend it, you know, over the, you know, your template or whatever? I mean, I've got the answer, but in general.
Sure. So if you're just bending it over your template, then you're just adding form to the metal. You're not actually shaping the metal.
Right.
So in order to achieve that compound,
Actual-
I need to change the thickness of the metal, which is metal shaping.
Okay.
And then you'll see it'll slowly start to come into shape. And then, of course, some of it is it is a combination of shape and form.
The Billy Lane bender. You know how many times we watched Billy Lane bend something over his his leg.
Sure.
You know,
just like here. So say now what I'll do is now that I know that this top needs to be an 18-inch radius, I'll come back with my radius gauge and keep working it on this tool until I hit that, until that lays flat into there. But you also don't want to apply too much because then you're not going to achieve your goal.
Right.
And then I'll do what we were just saying, where I'll come in and actually
tweak
just
here
form
and
this
there,
literally
right.
over my knee.
Yeah, give yourself a little bit of form or something.
Right. And if you saw at the end there, I kind of did like a kind of a spiral out of the center. That was to raise this flat part up because I didn't want any more
Right,
down
out
on
of
this
the
part.
bottom.
So now you see I have the shape this way, which is a combination of shape and form.
Yeah.
And then I have a slight radius. It's
Right.
going to be a little flatter because I don't have the wheel.
Right.
But because this machine is only so
Really
powerful.
on that English
but
wheel thing, aren't you?
But we'll get it pretty good. So we're getting
Yeah,
there.
it's cool like to watch. We have an event coming up here, the Tennessee Music Revival, which if you've never heard of it, look it up, find a way to get there. It's an amazing event. Buck and Carrie have gone out of their way to really fine-tune this. Bill Dodge, the BC Invitational, which Flatbroke's invited to this year, which we're pretty proud of. A great event for us because not only do we get to showcase our bikes, but it's an event where we go to is like you people. Like we go in there as guests.
Cool.
You know, we don't have a lot to do, but to see everybody's different bikes that they bring to the table, that's the whole reason that, we go. The music, the atmosphere, all that's good, but to be with our friends and see all this stuff, all the different new designs and stuff people come up with is cool. Is pretty awesome. So if you get a chance, look up that Tennessee Music Revival. It's at Loretta Lynn Ranch. The place is just amazing. Everything about the event's top notch.
Sweet. So now that I have this top shape almost established of the direction that I want to go, I'm going to come in and hit those shrink marks. There's multiple ways to shrink metal. You could do them with thumbnail dies. Like I have a Pullmax machine with a thumbnail die on it, and it's real controlled and it's a really nice way to do it. But again, that's building the arsenal of tooling. So this is a much more affordable way to achieve a shrink.
Same finished product, just a longer
Process and not as precision, but it does get the job done.
Right.
This is every tool has its purpose. I could show you a really cool example I'll do later with a piece of sheet metal, where you could take like an angle, almost like a piece of angle iron, but made out of sheet metal, and we can make like an S out of it. And that's all shrink and stretch, where you shrink on the inside and stretch on the outside, and you can take a piece of angle iron.
Angle iron to boot. Yeah.
So the way that these work, this is a stretcher, this is a shrinker, same exact setup, but it's got 4 jaws that come down a little offset from each other, and then they squeeze on that last pull. So it's making the metal thicker.
Right.
And you'll see it's pretty effective, and it'll suck the corners in pretty good. And I usually stagger them, but you can see just from that one pull, the whole panel comes down. So I'll do a couple deep ones, and then in the middle I'll come with a shallower one. That'll help keep it nice and kind of even.
And you're doing those right on your marks. You're working from your marks.
Yeah, I'm working off of them, yeah.
And obviously, the further in you push the metal, the bigger chunk you're going to get the impression on, or the shrink, or the stretch on. So he's, slowly work your way in and out from the deepest to the outside edge.
This takes a lot of force. It has a lot to do with the leverage of why the pedal's so long and why this machine, like this tool here, is so stout.
Yeah.
So you don't have that flex in the machine. That's why power hammers are so heavy.
Yeah.
It's just concentrate all the energy from the machine into the piece, not just lost into the machine.
Right.
And why they also don't have a very deep throat depth to them.
Right. Yeah.
Some of the more expensive, you could spend $4 or $5 grand on just a kick shrinker, even more really.
But again, like you were saying, it all matters what you need it for. First off, how far you'll go with spending the money.
Yeah, this setup here is a couple $100,
And
but
how much do you use a piece like this? Do you use this a lot?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I use it a lot.
You have a little bit more control.
Yep. And then I'll feather it out, and I'm not really pushing down too hard. I don't want too much of a shrink here. Because if you over shrink it, you'll get too much of a curve.
Right.
Then you're gonna come back in and stretch it out. And because again, you can very easily overwork.
No, and it's nice that, I mean, you can actually step by step see the change in the metal, you know, like how you're manipulating the metal.
So, get one more. You could, just from that 2 minutes on the machine, you could see how this started to suck down and come in and meet this panel. So now you can see how the metal, just like the paper, is starting to fit the mold.
Right.
You know?
And like you said, not a lot of time.
What's that?
And not a lot of time. Like
Right.
that was only a minute or two over there doing that.
So I'll change the die now on planishing hammer. Do a nice steep one. This die correlates to what I mapped out earlier.
Right. And like tool-wise, I mean, this is a Mittler Brothers tool. I think we talked $250, maybe $300 for this bench mount plenishing hammer.
Yeah.
I mean, it works great for what we use it for.
Sure.
It's really versatile. To be able to, you know, clamp it down to the weld table, you know, with, you know, all the product that weld table gives us. It's an amazing little tool for a little bit of money. And if you mess with it and you learn the ins and outs of it, it's amazing the stuff you could do with that thing.
Yeah. Again, and also the super effective tool, especially when you're doing gas tanks. You don't need to take up a lot of room in your shop.
Right.
Most guys don't have big shops.
Right.
I don't, you know. It depends what you're working on. Like where I'm doing a car panel, I need the throat depth.
Deep,
so
yeah,
like my
deeper.
planishing hammer is this tall, and it's
real deep.
I don't know what it is, 42 inch or 48 inch
48
throat
inch depth.
But that's when you're working a car panel or a
Yeah,
hood or
and
this.
you
that
can buy
need that.
these. You can get these with bigger, shorter. I mean, they
Sure.
have this same version.
Yeah.
You can get, but you
But
know,
it's
I mean,
amazing what you can build with a little machine like this.
right?
You know.
Yeah, it's not
perfect
hard. I
for-
mean, in all
yeah.
reality, it's an air chisel.
Yeah, yeah. So now that I have these shrinks in and I got this edge down, I'm going to come in with a sharp radius die, and I'm going to smooth that all out and bring the edge down.
Right.
And try to achieve this whole sweep there.
And again, you know, I mean, there is going to be body work done to this piece, but like we'd said before, a raw bike, like Brian Butera has a raw stainless frame. So your finished product is your finished product, you know,
Right.
like your metal product. So you have the ability to go either really crazy with it, like what Brian had done, and, you know, I've seen you build some raw metal stuff, or get it as close you can and let some mud work take up, which, you know, is always an option. But the better the piece of metal is, the cleaner the finished product, the better the actual finished
Right.
bike will be, or
Sure.
the tank, or whichever it's for.
I think I overheard Maben saying he's doing a seminar later on metal finishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be another.
Yeah,
Go right
follow
with this.
right
Yeah,
through
follow
with
follow
this.
through. Watch that seminar after
Right.
this one. There's a lot of processes.
Yep.
To all of this, you know. So I'm gonna make some more noise.
And if you can watch, if you can see in the camera, he's sort of staying with a line, an outside edge. And if you can watch as he gets further up towards the front of the tank, he moves that in and stays with that light line he was talking about before. So, I mean, it's a shame we can't get right in on him, watch him do it, but he's not just hammering at this thing. There's actually a method to the madness. We talked about yesterday with Austin and Brian that it being metal, it being hard substance, how delicate it really is, the cleanliness, the, you know, making sure you're thinking ahead. Don't do something that in 5 steps you're going to end up hurting yourself. You're going to have to come back and repair that. Now, obviously, he could go into this really deep into it and mess himself up, but he sort of has a line that he's following, and it all reflects back to that light line that he was talking about before. I was just saying how, as you're doing that, it's almost like you're following that light line you had mentioned before.
That's
you know?
exactly what I was just about to say is this is where I'm establishing that line.
Right.
I probably should have shown on the template where I would mark that light line out and put that back in here. So I don't know if you'll be able to see, but I took the light line.
Do it right here. You can catch it with this camera.
Where it would start heavier up here, and I started to feather it out as it came back down here because the back of this tank's a little flatter than it is up here. All your shape is kind of up in here. So that machine, like especially when you're using a sharp radius like that, that's a really good time to screw your whole panel up.
Right, that's what I was saying, like to make sure you watching that line and not overriding yourself and not overstepping and having to come back and fix something.
Right, because once you put a big wave into that, it's a
hard
bitch
to get
that
out.
Yeah.
And the English wheel would really help with that. I mean, that would make a big difference.
Hey, listen.
Which the importance of
Adapt
each of
and
these
overcome.
tools, you know.
That's
But
it.
right, if you don't have the ability to have some of this, and one of the things that we stress all the time is, for years, me and Chris have brought to people's attention that we never had any of this stuff. We bent our frames with pipes on workbenches and sheds, and I mean, for years that's how we did it. And progressing, these tools make it easier to do it with, but I mean, you can almost achieve anything if you plan it out, if you think smart while you're moving.
I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna bring this in a little more. This is the part of the process that takes hours and hours and hours.
Right.
But for demonstration purposes,
Trying
there's
to
obviously a lot
push
that
through
we'll brush over.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
I'll try to bring-
unfortunately, we only have X amount of hours, to be able to bring this to. And again, he's staying with that light line. He's not overriding further into the top of the panel. He's trying to work on this edge right here. And then obviously he'll come back from that center line and try and get more bevel to it.
Being that I just stretched that out and I had some shrinks up here, first I put some shrink into it, but then obviously I'm stretching some of that shrink back out. So I started to shrinking this edge over. This top panel actually started to flatten back out. So I'm starting to stretch it back to where it was, and I lost some of the shrinks that I put into it earlier. So I need this to come back down, but you could see, just like paper, these corners are starting to buckle.
Yeah.
So in order to bring that back down, I need to make that metal there thicker, just like if it were paper, and put a fold in it and bring it back down. So I'll get it to kind of where I want it. And it looks like, oh man, I just screwed the panel up.
Right.
But you come back into the kick shrinker, shrink it back down, it'll smooth that out.
Right.
You're back and forth a lot.
And I said, knowing, obviously he's done this multiple times, but knowing your marks a lot of times to set that thing back down here and maybe Sharpie 2 or 3 spots. Because if you go too far, then you're going to end up with a kink in the top. Right now he's working with trying to get this piece laid back down. So
it's a lot easier to shrink something back down than it is to
stretch it
shrink
out.
back out, kind of. Where like that, where if you overstretch it, you could quick cut it back in, So I'll just blend that shrink out real quick.
And notice how light he's going. He's not hammering on. He's working specifically on the area that he thought he had, needed a little bit more stretch and a little bit of shrink to.
So now you see it fits again, but I don't have that buckle anymore in there.
And you're still keeping that, like I'm looking right at that light line. You're still keeping it with the bend. So knowing, like coloring inside the line, staying in that line.
And again, that's something that you would spend a lot of time. And then when you have your sides back on, welded on, you come back in and fine tune that, because when you have an open shell like this, depending on the capability of your machine, you can come back in here and what I'll do is I'll planish that whole seam back out, and blend it, and and then once you metal finish that, you could have a nice raw.
And again, planning ahead, to know not to put the bottom of the tank on, or like you said, to be able to get in there and still work on it.
As you work it, your lines will obviously fade away from working it. So every once in a while, I'll come back in and reestablish that center line.
And especially when you're working with an English wheel, because that center line's where you run off of. What you're doing again with the plenishing hammer, but that working from the center line out's giving you that consecutive bevel in the center of the tank.
I want to bring the tail end a little bit down. Like you can see how this is just real long and flat. Whereas the Sportster has that cut back.
Drop back.
So just from one shrink, you could see the difference.
Yep.
From where it's real long and thin to just hitting it real quick, boom, cuts right down.
Turns it down. It's a shame that we don't have the ability, which we do, but not, live at a place like this, to have the ability to have this done from start to finish. You'd end up with only 2 people do it through a whole weekend time-wise. We had said before, one of the things we wanted to try and do was to get a big enough stage with enough stuff to have multiple guys up here working on different things at one time, which would be fantastic. We've done it. It's a little bit hectic, but it's a shame that we don't have the time just to run one the whole way through. I mean, we built the War Pony, a bike on stage, over 10 weeks, 10 different shows, and it was difficult, but we did it.
Now I have that kick comes back down.
Yeah.
And now it's just fitting closer and closer to the thing. So I guess that's as close as we'll get it for today for the top, and then I'll start doing the sides.
Yeah.
But again, this is just practice and practice and practice and hours, and it's very, very
back and forth from the plenishing hammer to an English wheel to the shrinker stretcher. Like every one of these tools work with or against each other.
Absolutely.
To end up making the final product. Which again, I grew up, in all reality, that was the only thing I had.
Right.
So learning how to do this stuff, and I have an array. I have probably 20 different hand dies, dollies like this, and an anvil that I'd never get rid of that anvil. And I can make anything with that. It's just the finished product piece is, it's so much easier with the machinery. Sure. This hurts your hands. It hurts. I have no elbows or shoulders or wrists anymore because of doing that for so long.
So that's another thing that I was talking about earlier, keeping your elbows in and that body fatigue. Another thing that I learned from Faye is just this hammer. I only use wooden handled hammers. The fiberglass or the other ones, they're really heavy.
Yep.
You gotta remember there's times where you're sitting here for hours getting the highs and lows out, and it's a lot to swing that all day.
And I learned also to don't hold on to it. Don't death grip that thing. Let it work in your hand. Let the hammer do the work, not your arm.
Yep, exactly.
So,
you got to let the weight of the head.
Yeah.
That's why a real balanced hammer, like, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Another thing I'll do that is a trick that Faye taught me is like the neck of this hammer is usually just taper straight.
Yeah.
I'll put it on the belt sander and I'll grind.
Clean it up.
I'll thin this out. So basically, what that's doing is one, it's making it light. One, it's making it lighter, but it also every time you strike, that vibration
stops.
It helps reduce that vibration from going into your body. That's why you'll see a lot of those giant power hammers. You're standing on wood, like a pallet almost.
Yeah, right.
You know, just to get rid of that vibration from going into
coming
you.
through the floor.
Right. That way, you know, because everybody knows that in the motorcycle industry, you retire really young.
Oh yeah.
Very wealthy. So you don't want to be beat up.
Wait,
too,
you
know?
said wealthy?
Yeah, right.
You've been lying to me all this time.
Chris, I think there was one seminar where you asked me. It was some interview, and they're like, "Well, how do you make a living in the motorcycle industry?" And I said, "I build cars."
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a very difficult industry. A lot of work. God, the time that these people put into, you know, obviously, if you can turn around the AMD bikes here, the time these people put into them, and you know, half these guys have jobs. I mean, this isn't what they do for a living. I mean, in all reality, you know, Chris with Cyclosource, I have not only the shop but Flat Broke with the two of us, but I have a construction company that, you know, somewhere along the line you have to justify some of this. Right. You know, it's a love for it. It's almost an addiction in one end. Sure. And I'm like you. The bike's cool. The bike's this. The bike. I'm a car guy. Right. I like the hot rods. I've been doing stuff like that my whole life. Been racing street bikes, racing cars, drag racing. So, you know, I agree with you. The only way you're going to make good money in this is to build a car.
Or get a job.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But that is why I have cars and all sorts of.
Right.
What I've been doing, so metal shaping, this isn't just motorcycles, as I was saying before. One thing I do a lot now is furniture and antique lighting replication. So,
we were just talking with Brian Butera about that.
Yeah.
He said one of his prized possessions is the counter at his wife's beauty salon. Yeah, like he said, it's one of his, you know, his favorite things he's ever made. Chris is just getting ready to do a, what's that? Oh, Chris is going to break the camera, which ought to be awesome. Maybe we can get that on camera. Chris is getting ready to make Heather, his wife, a bedroom set, like in all metal stuff. So, and hopefully Dana's not listening to this, because then she's going to be like, well, what are you making me? And I'm going to be like, well, nothing. So, nice. But yeah, like the you know, adding to, there's so much versatility to learning how just to work with this metal. It's not just bikes.
Sure, if you have these tools and a welder, you'll never be jobless.
Oh no,
you know,
ornamental fence work. I mean,
absolutely.
What's Orange County Choppers? I mean, that's where Senior, where he got his start was ornamental fences.
Absolutely.
So you know, wrought iron railings and stuff.
Right now, I'm building these giant chandeliers, and it's all just sheet metal.
Right.
Sheet metals, tools, and a welder. It's it. A couple months ago, we built these giant steel rings that were staggered, and they were for Estee Lauder, the makeup company. It was for their pool house. Oh yeah. Just random, whatever, lighting chairs, tables, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, back to the tank.
Back to reality.
The what's that? I don't know. So I got the tank for demonstration purposes. I'll say that the top is complete.
Right.
So now I'll come in and I'll paper pattern with the same exact process, the two sides. Maintaining symmetry, I'm only going to pattern one side. That way I'll just take this, flip it, and do everything the opposite. Right. But at least I know that I'm starting from two exact pieces.
Yeah, same pieces of metal.
Once I cut this out of sheet metal, I'll actually clamp them together and grind them as one, so that way I know for a fact I'm starting with two identical pieces. So again, I know that the bottom, as you can see on here, the bottom sits flat on the table. So I know the bottom is a flat edge, but as you start to curve it, that starts to change. Again, there's a gap in here, so that means I need to fold this paper, which identifies as a shrink.
And you'll do the same thing again. You'll use
I'll figure out the radius.
The Faye Butler radius checker.
I know that this was a 2, and I want to blend into another 2 so that they come together nice.
Right.
So I'll use that 2 on the top of this.
And that'll
panel
work
as well.
pretty much the whole way around.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'll figure out again the radius of the actual sides of the tank. Put that into here. Same exact process, just different. And then the hard part about doing the sides is you have to think in opposites.
Yeah.
You know, so you're shrinking the top of this side, but you have to not shrink that side because then you'll have 2 lefts. You need to have a left and a right, obviously.
Like 2 left feet.
Right. So I already have this paper pattern out. Again, I already know what I would do. Would take this piece as I would work this for a few hours and get this to lay right down
Perfect
onto
on
that.
it, yeah.
The reason making a buck is important. This is another Fey philosophy. Is making a buck gives you rules. Like this is the
buck
shape that you
meaning
need
your
to.
template.
Yeah, like a mold or a buck,
Right.
or you could
Yeah.
paper pattern that welder if you wanted. Now you have that desired shape to achieve. It challenges you as a fabricator to get to that. If you don't have a mold, then you're kind of just accepting what you've made.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so technically, if I spent a few more hours, this would fit real nice and
Right.
flush.
It would fit like a hat.
But if I didn't have this mold, I would just accept this shape as
Right.
good, and it looks good on the bike. But ultimately, it's not really what I wanted.
Yeah.
So that's where making a buck,
Yeah,
is an important part.
I've made a few side panels for bikes, and I'll make them out of like a hard wood.
Right.
And I've used them 100 times. So, having an actual metal one gives you a little bit to work on.
Sure.
The wood ones are nice because you can beat on them. Also, you can use them as a shaper with a hammer.
Yeah. You'll see most like coach builders that build car bodies are all wood.
Yep.
Wood has a little more flex to it.
Right.
And it's just easier to work with.
Yeah, a little bit more forgiving than
Yeah.
metal.
Yeah. Another thing goes back to maintaining your hammer is using a wood buck. If you're, beating on a piece of metal that you're putting onto it, a metal buck will put tooling marks into it and stuff like that, whereas wood won't mar that.
Right.
This is especially an important technique when you're working with aluminum, whereas it's a lot softer.
Yeah.
One thing I'll do pretty regularly is
Tape your hammer.
I'll polish. I'll polish
keep
the
it
face
keep
of
it
the hammer.
nice and
yeah.
smooth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because over time you'll get nicks in it and stuff like that.
And
And
that'll
that nick
show
every
up.
time you hit.
Oh,
More
yeah.
so in aluminum, not really in steel, but it'll put a nick.
Yeah, and you got to
It'll transfer.
remember also with English wheel stuff. I remember specifically
Absolutely.
Aaron Green with pulling these off. Make sure that your English wheel they're all clean. Make sure your punishing hammer is all clean. Because if not, it's gonna show through your metal the whole way.
Yeah, you got to make sure there's no oxidation on there.
Yeah.
So, I made this fixture where I'd put each English wheel die in the lathe, and I would just sit there, just if I really needed to work them out. Another thing I'll do is like in the English wheel here. See the English wheel here?
Yeah,
the lower die. I'll stuff.
Catch your finger in there.
I'll stuff a piece of Scotch-Brite folded up underneath that lower die. That way, every time I pass, it kind of self-cleans itself, But then later on, you got to remember to clean all that.
Someday you'll
junk off.
get to work with that English wheel.
Yeah, can't wait.
Watch you don't walk into it.
That's it. And then if there's time after I make these sides, I'll put some beads into the top of the tank or something.
Yeah. Time-wise, make sure we're. Let's give you your
What time
airline
is it?
back.
The best is when you put the Sharpie in your mouth the wrong way.
Oh, I hate when that happens. I've also grown to love the taste of a Sharpie. So. Watch, Austin's watching. You nervous? Oh, boy. We have a question. What is it? Oh, again, yeah. He's gonna smash it with a hammer. I think he's gonna. One of these days, Chris is gonna do a whole segment on how you can break everything that you own and feel better about yourself. So it's gonna be pretty good. I'm gonna watch it because I've watched them argue with these things for a year and a half now. So he had actually mentioned earlier, Austin, that he was going to smash it with a hammer live on camera. He was going to kill a camera on camera. So hey, look at the blue light.
That one?
This one over here. It doesn't matter. Does it really matter at this point? No, it doesn't matter. Shh, Evan doesn't know that. What are you doing? Explain to the people what you're doing.
I have my sides patterned out, and I'm just transferring them right now to the sheet metal, a left and a right, which is the same thing for right now until I start putting some shape to it.
So while you're doing that, Austin Andrella actually comes in with a question from Facebook. Do you recommend making a wood buck and hammer forming the bottom of the tank to make an edge weld instead of a 90-degree corner weld for vibration and possible cracking?
No. I would say that's more of a personal preference. I don't know if you need to necessarily do that. I built dozens of tank edge welded like that. That goes back to proper welding procedure. I've never had one crack.
We did have a couple guys up here the other day doing some welding stuff. So you may reflect back on it, might be able to learn something.
Does it help? Sure. It's definitely could be stronger. But then you have to, maybe if you're Frisco mount, like rigid mounting your tank, but if you're doing rubber mounts, that'll eliminate that regardless. But
what do you want this time?
What's that? Try that nibbler again.
I just had it plugged in. You just unplugged it.
I don't know why I still use these gloves. They have holes in them.
It's a thought that counts. Would you like another pair?
They're sentimental.
Oh, that's what it is.
No,
You know, there's the same gloves that I use, and the answer to that question is just about the time they get perfectly broke in is when they have all the holes in them.
Yep.
Right. Separating them first, or are you cutting them out?
I'll just go for it.
As I slowly try and keep all the metal shavings from flying into the turn sideways.
You want to dance?
We need a bigger table. Is that what you're saying? Look at you go, little buddy. You're on a roll.
I'm not rolling in anything. There's no English.
That's what he just said. Is there an echo in here? Can I have a little more guitar and monitor too? Well, now you did it. Oh boy. Oh boy. Yeah, it's funny to keep in mind that, you know, you got to give these guys a lot of credit, you know, with Evan and, you know, Austin and Brian yesterday and stuff to come into a place with a small compressor and tools they're not comfortable using. And, you know, I mean, we tell people to bring whatever, you know, whatever you're most comfortable with to work with. But, I mean, it's hard being out of your actual element. These shops are like people's living rooms in all reality. So
Right.
to come in here, use odd tools, and still, you know, maintain a level of professionalism sometimes
Try to.
fairly difficult. We've
Yeah.
we've had a few meltdowns on stage. So
So now that I have my two sides cut out, I will clamp them together and I'll grind them and get them the same exact shape. I like to use these. These are new; they just came out
yeah, they're
by Armor.
nice. Yep.
And they're cool. They're self-adjusting. You just set your tension, and they'll go from anything.
How much
anything.
is a set? Do they come singles or?
They come. There's different options.
Is
You can
there?
buy them individually, or you can buy them as sets.
That's
so you can
on the
go up
list,
to,
Mark.
like,
That's on the tool list we're going
Oh, yeah.
home with.
yeah. I mean, they're super fast, especially when you're doing a lot of fixturing.
Yep.
You can, you know, with this vice grip, go up to this table and clamp it, and it's a nice set. But then you can go over to something that's a different thickness and clamp that. You don't have to go back and adjust it every time.
Yeah, they're super nice.
They also make a really nice set of clamps. They're in conjunction with weld tables where
Yeah.
they go into these 16 millimeter holes.
Which, if you haven't seen the table before, this is a weld table, and the
This
stuff.
is one of the best tools I own.
Oh my God,
is a weld
we
table.
feel the same way.
Yeah.
It's loaded in the back of the van or the back of the trailer at every event, because when we get home and that door opens,
Yeah.
this is the first thing that's got to come out.
Yep.
You can do anything. They give you so many different attachments that you can. I mean, it's a frame table. It's a
Yeah.
you know what I mean. It's a weld
everything.
table. It's you know a tool rack. It's
I
amazing.
feel like after I got my weld table, my level of quality of my finished product, everything was way straighter and
And it was
perfect
easier.
90s and quicker.
Yep.
And easier. Same
Yeah,
thing
this
with
is
these armor clamps.
a
Same
great
concept.
investment.
Yeah. And I'm not just saying this because I'm
Oh boy.
possibly sponsored by them.
Stop it now. Oh,
But they are really
was
good.
That a
I'm not just saying
shameless-
that, but they
that
are
was
really
a
good.
shameless plug. That'll be like $3. That was great.
But yeah, they gave me a whole set of these different. You know, they're different ones.
Well,
There's
you know, now
long.
that-
There's flat.
Now
there's-
that means you have to send a set of them to me.
Yeah.
You know that, right?
I'm on it. You got this big
Oh,
one.
yeah.
You know.
And it's funny because in all reality, when it comes to stuff like this, there's only one name that you ever use, and that was Vice Grip.
Sure.
So anything, and so to have somebody else come out with a really good product like this, because I have some that are forever old. They're still my favorite. I use them all the time.
Right. You got any more of these wheels?
Sure.
So now that I have these two clamped together, I'm gonna grind them out. I still have my line on here because I cut a little bit outside that line, so it's still visible. Thank you. How are we on time, Chris? Time? What's that? How much longer you want me to go? Okay. Maybe I'll just do one side or something.
Well, that was mental technical difficulty, was what that was. It's like, I mean, nice having these clamps. You know, they work really well, and the nice part about this weld table is to be able to, you know, you can just grab a setup, set it on there, and clamp those things right down, let them hang off the table. They wouldn't even move. So, yeah, the versatility of, you know, the table compared to using other things it's huge. And again, he's got his lines marked. He's bringing it back down right to his Sharpie lines. Two pieces together, which are going to end up being opposite sides, but like you said, it's keeping it symmetrical. He knows when he starts, if he marks his lines right, he's going to end up in a, you know, with a nice even piece on both sides. Which in Pat Jansen's words, again, you can't see both sides of a motorcycle at one time. So it's just Evan being picky.
Now wait a minute. Depending on what angle you're looking at the motorcycle, you can see both bottoms of the tank.
Would Pat say if you have them bird's eyes, you can see both sides?
Okay. So now I got these two halves identical. Identical. Before I shape it, I'll get that burr off though. So
Oh, now you ruined it.
Well, you guys on social media are kind of quiet today, but I want to remind you, you can send your questions or comments in. You can see the little box up there. We're bringing everything in from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, the whole deal, so participate.
Yeah, definitely, because this is, you know, I mean, I know we all like to hear ourselves talk, but part of the reason why we do this is to bring it to you. If you have questions, give you the opportunity to maybe see something done that you normally, you know, wouldn't have the ability to see somebody do by hand. And if you're anything like us, we want to do it all by hand.
That's right. Sweet. So I got the side cut out for the most part. And now what I'll do is basically I'll just start with adding some form and just literally just roll that around that tank and just to generally get it where I want it.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back and fine tune that with the English wheel, planishing hammer.
That English wheel again.
Stuff like that.
That is, I'll tell you what I like about this English wheel we have here. It doesn't take up a lot of room.
That's right. I'll try and, on the inside I have these lines in here. And that's kind of just like the center of this arc.
Yeah.
Because you need to kind of, you need to account for where it's going to wrap around. You don't want to start that bend, even though you're just forming it.
Yeah.
Which is just a bend. You don't want to come up too short, too far.
Yeah, you still want to identify where your bends are all going to be. And oh, he got a new pair of gloves. He's whining about the old ones. He has a new pair in his back.
I got a brand new.
Maybe he brought them for us.
I don't like the brand new ones though. Like you said, these are all nice and broken in. You know.
Just when they get comfortable.
But I mean, like these are super cool because I didn't have to adjust it quick.
Oh yeah.
Easy.
I think you should just leave them here with us.
Yeah.
I think that's what you should do. Because they work really nice. And they'd look great at our shop. So unlike the last time we were talking about just grabbing it, you know, I was saying like watching years ago Billy Lane bending a piece of metal over his leg. You know, you don't have any bevels in this. You have the ability to actually start making those bends.
So just rough, got it wrapped around. And now I'll use that paper pattern that I made earlier and figure out where my shrinks are. That's earlier, like you could even see just sometimes a nice marker is just a dirty finger. You know, we'll get all those lines on there for you. I'll transfer that to the piece of metal. 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna put a little tension in this panel. I would use a wheel. I'll use the flatter die on the planishing hammer now, just to put a little shape into that, because a flat piece of metal is flimsy.
Yeah.
You know, so you put a little tension into it. Even if you want it flat, you just hit it a couple times with that hammer, and you'll just put a little tension in the panel, and it'll kind of stay where you want.
You'll notice on some cars you end up with a flat panel that you can push it like pop in and out or buckle. Yeah, to eliminate that.
You see that especially when you're doing like a lot of car hoods, like where they call it like oil canning or tin canning, where a hood will pop in and not pop out.
Right.
That's where, like in coach building, you have to have that proper tension in the panel to maintain that. And basically everything you're doing, all the shaping is you're applying dent resistance.
Yeah.
Because a flat piece of sheet metal you could just tap and you put a dent in it.
in it.
This, it'll take a lot of effort to dent that.
Yeah,
you know?
I've seen people do hoods and stuff on hot rods and, you know, older cars, and they got it just enough in there, but if they pulled it out from the core garage into the sun, the hood would pop.
Yeah.
You know, or it would suck down and like you'd see.
Sure.
So getting that little bit of a arc to it, a little bit of metal tension.
That's
really
actually where this machine, the bead roller, comes in.
Yeah.
Bead rollers, a bead really has just evolved into a design, but they're really for strength.
Yeah, for the
you look on the side of a
floorboards.
school bus, they have all those ridges down the side. That's not for aerodynamics. That's because they're just big and flat. They need some sort of rigidity. So.
Oh yeah.
you know, I could put a couple beads in this, and then you won't even be able to bend that.
But figure you got a flat piece of metal, something like this. I mean, that's your whole floorboard in a car.
Yeah.
Same setup, and you figure you put 4 or 5, 6 different sections of beading in it, and you could stand 3 people on it without affecting the, the actual structure of the metal.
Right. Or like those old Cadillac hoods that are 1,000,000 feet long.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah. Need air? Need air, you said?
Yeah. Huh? Nice. Thank you. Here, just for reference.
Yeah.
That's pretty flimsy.
And you almost notice how he's starting to hammer and he's always coming back to this point. So he's moving in and out.
Now you could barely do that.
Already got
all
some
that tension.
rigid to it.
And there's a slight crown to it, which is what we want.
Right. Yeah, I was saying you were working the whole time you were doing that. You were starting from the point and working, in pattern all the way down to the bottom of the tank.
Yeah.
Not just one line. He was making sure he was giving it all.
That way you don't create waves too.
Right.
Now I have a nice even
Which the body guy likes.
crown to it. So now that I have that goes around. But now I got to bring this, suck this whole corner in, and those are a series of shrinks, just like I did on the front of the tank.
Right.
You could see this move just as I kick it, just like without holding, how much it sucks it down.
Again, like you can see the difficulty he has getting in there. Obviously, it's a 1.5 1.75 inch flat piece of metal that he's trying to get a angle, a beveled piece of metal into. A little bit of a struggle, but the more he's moving through it, like it's actually creating its own, creating its own bend.
On some panels, real complicated ones like fenders and stuff, you'll have to physically, like where I put the buckle in it before, like on the top, you'll have to buckle it just to get it into the machine, and then work that out later.
Right.
That's more car stuff, bigger stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you can see just from those quick couple shrinks how that whole corner,
Which,
boom,
came
right in. It's laying right,
almost
right onto
perfectly.
that tank.
Almost like you've done this before.
Once or twice.
I mean, let's not get carried away or anything, but
Another reason why I like building cars, well, they have their pros and cons, is the panels are a lot bigger.
Yep.
So
more
it's
work
harder
area.
to achieve that light line. Instead of a light line this long on a tank, now you challenge yourself by making a light line that's X amount of feet long,
Yeah, I remember just getting started. I did a Mark IV or Mark V hood.
Yikes.
And that thing literally is like 7.5 feet long.
Crazy.
And to make it nice and straight and get it all situated and be able to have a good finished product to get done is an achievement.
I chopped a 50 Merc. And,
boy, that's a long one.
Yeah, and did 54 Packard rear quarter panels on it. And the lines are so long and sweeping where you're literally working off of a 10-foot line, literally, that needs to
And there's
match.
nothing straight about that line.
Nothing straight.
It's got a nice...
And you can't have those two arcs meet at the wrong intersecting point.
Oh, yeah, or boy, that
then-
light looks dumb.
Yeah.
It looks like an accident.
Right. And always make sure your eye protection's on your head.
Well, yeah, in the right spot, of course.
Smoothed it out, but now you can see, like earlier on the top, now it stretched it back out. So I'll come back in, I'll shrink that, and then I'll suck that right back in.
Yeah. But the difference from where you started till now, again, just a few minutes on each machine, you know, is a definite sign of knowing where to from your marks and your center lines to make your moves.
You'll see, like, it's the same concept of, like, say you don't have any of these shrinking machines, guys will, like, put a pie cut. It's the same exact concept. You know, you're doing that fold. You're just eliminating.
Yeah, and welding the pie cut.
Right.
So, and not ruining the structure of the metal and all, and, you know what I mean, in all reality.
So, now your side is pretty much made. Now I would go back in again for demonstration purpose, but I would go in and really fine tune this and have this whole corner come and meet the buck, and then everything would be good to go. After this one is done or close, sometimes what I'll do is, so you don't forget your process, I'll bend this one,
Yep.
I'll do this crown, do that crown. Work, you know, back and forth. That way
Don't
you can
finish one completely.
Yeah, because you'll never remember how much you really, you know, unless it's like right after the next one. So I would go to this one, I'd start to do that. Once I have these two halves, bottoms made, I would again use my center line, and then this is when you start tack welding.
Right.
There's a whole, I mean, you could do a whole other seminar on metal prep alone before welding.
Oh, yeah.
So there's so much more to talk about just on that, but that's where I would come back in here with a file and give myself a sheared edge to get rid of any impurities. I would acetone everything, but that's a whole other.
Yeah, we went through
That's
yesterday
actually what Austin
a lot
and
with
Brian,
Austin and Brian, yeah.
So as you can see, I would line that up with my center line there, and then this fits in there pretty good, and I would start tacking around all that. I always like to start right on my dead center line, work off of that,
and work your way.
and then you can kind of see how that all wants to come together.
Right.
I use the same radius die on the hammer so that this is all one gradual
You're right.
radius that'll match, and then I would tack up front, and I'll work my way. I wouldn't tack here and then tack there, because
Yeah.
you never know. That's why you got to have a little extra skin there, a little extra meat
Little
to work with, because you don't want to leave yourself a big gap. That's where coming into welding is all about proper fitment, you know.
Yeah.
And that's, you don't want big
And
gaps.
that's what I was saying too about, you know, we were talking about on the line, before the line, after the line.
Right.
I'm always an after the line guy solely because of that extra material. You know, that way you're always better safe than sorry. The, you know, measure twice, cut once kind of thing. When it comes to metal, if you're into that, well, I don't have enough material, sometimes you can't fill that with weld.
Sure.
Sometimes you put yourself in a bad spot, so.
Yeah, it sucks if you ever had to make a long sliver. You know, and that's that. So there's your gas tank.
Well, there's.
I would finish welding it before you put
2/3.
any gas in it, though.
There's 2/3 of your gas.
Yeah, it's 2/3
So-
of the gas. Actually,
Well,
no, it's
one-
half because
yeah,
you got
it's
to put a
half.
bottom in it. So I would tack all the way around. I'd get all my tacks, get the whole top shell done. Then I would come in and I would finish weld my whole top. That way I still have complete access. The bottom is totally open.
Yeah, still be able to get in there and do some work.
I can figure out what shape on the bottom here I wanted, if I needed it to come in, or that all has to do with your mold. And that's that. I like to weld A to B. I don't like to jump around. The reason being is when you're welding, as it cools, it actually shrinks a little past where you started. That comes into, especially on like a quarter panel or a hood, you could pre-stretch your panels to account for shrinkage. No matter what kind of welding, whatever you're doing, there's always that shrinkage that you have to account for.
So on this, instead of, we talked about the heat and the transfer of heat and welding and how it affects the metal.
Right.
I mean, spots, keep working your way down. Do you one run and take care of whatever you have to after?
Yeah, so I'll tack it all just to get all my proper fitment and get all my gap signals safe. And I'll just start and go all the way down. That way, that wave, you don't lock it into the panel.
Yeah, it works
that wave,
its way out.
you chase to the end of the panel, and then you're out.
Yeah.
It saves time on all your end metal finishing and all that.
Compared to like we were talking about yesterday with stuff like doing stuff like this, it's a different story because you're adding 2 pieces of metal and you're looking for a perfectly straight, a finished product perfectly straight.
Yep.
So totally different situation than what you're
two
in.
fabrication and sheet metal fabrication are completely different versions of
this right here, if you get a heat, a bevel, or anything into it, you're sort of stuck with that product. On this, you have the ability to, like you said, chase it out, work it into a different situation. So, definitely, and as similar as the two are material-wise, weld-wise, fabrication-wise, 2 completely different worlds. So,
absolutely. That's why some guys are really good at sheet metal, not so good building an exhaust system, and vice versa, or handlebars.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Some dudes are incredible at coping, tubing, and this and that.
Yeah.
But not so much on sheet metal. That's why it's a whole different world.
Don't give them a fender, or don't give them a because they're gonna totally screw themselves up.
And again, that's just experience and just building them a bunch. Another thing I like to do with the sheared edge, I don't like to use there's a million ways to build a gas tank. There's a million ways to cut a panel out. One way I wouldn't recommend on a gas tank would be to plasma cut that. That has to do with the molecular structure of the steel. Basically, when you're plasma cutting that edge, now you have a hardened edge. That heat hardened that metal in whatever your heat affected zone was.
Like you said before, that Beverly shear, even with the nibbler or with anything else, the Beverly shear gives you a ready to work product.
Yeah, you're
ready to go.
Right off the Beverly, acetone,
you're ready to go.
Nice, quick, easy.
So in adding any of the other things, it's not structurally ruining it, but it's almost making a little bit more work for you in almost every other direction you go in.
So then your weld is going to be more prone to cracking and stress fractures and all that.
Yeah.
And molecularly is not as stable.
Right. Do we still have time? Where are we at?
Oh yeah, I'm kind of.
Tell everybody where we can get more information on Evan Favaro and Speakeasy Motors.
I'm on all the social medias. Just everything's at Speakeasy Motors, Facebook. I'm really active on Instagram mostly, because where you can see my day-to-day stuff. Some of the bigger stuff I'll post to both, but especially like in my stories, all my little. I like to post all my step-by-steps in the story, all the random stuff that we work on and all our crazy adventures and all that stuff. Well, you never know what rolls into the shop. I was just building a door for an Airstream last week. Everything, furniture, lighting, gas tanks.
Super versatile. So
I got everything from a 200 horsepower, a 1,000,000-foot long chopper in the shop to the Model A and Porsche and CB750s. And right now we're building a new project to watch out for is this 1,200 horsepower International Scout that we're doing, big Pro Charger.
You were telling me about that earlier.
That right now is just a frame and a rotted body. It's all sandblasted, so my whole metal restoration process is going on now.
Right.
That's it. So there's a lot going on in the shop.
Yeah, that way people take a look at what he does, and again, to pull him out of his busy schedule for AMD, bring him here to the Blue Ridge Cherokee Run, and couldn't be happier to have you with us. We're going to be
we're going to be coming back. I guess you're going to be coming back up here to do a little bit more.
Yeah, we got a small break here. Everybody sit still or grab a drink, come back in. We're going to have Dustin Maben up next, but thanks for hanging out with us here this afternoon at the Blue Ridge Run. We're going to take some time and switch some things over, and we'll be right back with you in just a few minutes.
Ooh.